the position of the horizontal slider. And then this is one of those things where you have to actually enter a value afterwards, and these are hexadecimal values. Far over to the left side is $, then 4 zeros, 0000. Over to the far right-hand side would be $8000, and it's just hex numbers, and it's just far left, far right. So now we've set that up. Now we can set it up so the center slider is at maximum. So max E, max C actually, because C is the first letter in center. So just setting this up right. And again, I'm being careful in going through and doing this, but I just hit max E by accident. If I hadn't noticed that, the script just would have run incorrectly, then I would have to go back and find the bonehead mistake I made. And that's the whole trick here, is just not making those mistakes. So anyway, this one caught in time, then min E. We want the edge slider set to a minimum. And now we've set up our sliders. We're in the right draw mode. Now we have to have it draw. And the way we do this is with commands called pen down and pen up. In other words, where should it start drawing? Where should it stop drawing? So first we will run pen down, P-N-D, pen D. And then we give it the X, Y values. And remember, we're starting at 0 on X, and we decided to do 75 on Y. Then our pen should go up at, we decided, 751 and 170. There we go. So this is going to draw the slider right across. Now, this will just draw a simple streak, and there's no problem with this. This would work. It'd be okay. But let's get a little fancier here and add a lighten and a darken at the top. This will create an emboss effect where we add a thin strip of light and a thin strip of dark. And in fact, if we draw another one underneath it, it will create a shadow. If we were to do this on the graphic now, let me just show you how it would look. What we do is, with these set up like this, we'd go to lighten mode. We draw a lighten across the top. Then we go to darken mode. We do a darken along the bottom. Don't forget the rectangle that I drew here isn't actually fading, so. And anyway, here's the emboss effect. Lighten at the bottom, lighten at the top, darken at the bottom. If you want to get fancy and put a drop shadow on it, you'd actually just draw it below here. So it ends something like that. And that would look like this. Where it puts the darken, and below that the darken actually creates the effect of a shadow. Easy. We switch to lighten mode, draw a rectangle, switch to darken mode, draw a rectangle. So we're already in draw rectangle mode. Our sliders are already set the way we want them. So let's go to lighten mode first. Remember, that's paint mode, lighten. Then our pen is going to start drawing at exactly the same place it drew before. So we do a pen D, 0.75. But now we want to actually stop drawing, not all the way at the bottom, because that would lighten the whole thing. But let's say, oh, I don't know, 20 pixels down. So instead of our pen up being 751, 170, it'll be 751, which will put it at the far right-hand side. But let's say 95. That's it so far. So this will draw a thin lighten, 20 pixels tall across. Now we go to darken mode. And we want this one to start drawing 20 pixels above the bottom. So far left-hand side, which is 0 on X. And again, you notice before every one of these I'm putting a capital A. We've actually got, if we take a look back at the script we've done, we've got quite a few things here in a row. But pen down at 0 and 20 above the bottom position. Well, our bottom position is 170. That's our bottom Y value. So we'll make it 0, 150. And then our pen up position should be 751. And we could put it exactly at the bottom, which would be 170. But we're going to draw it a little bit below that. Let's say 30 pixels below to add the drop shadow. So we'll make our bottom position 200. So now it's drawing a larger rectangle across and under. We are done. This is it. And if we've set this up properly and we haven't mistyped anything, this will work. And let's just save this file. Okay. And again, to test this, we need to quit Toaster Paint and restart. And we will just load any old picture here. But what we should get here is when we hit the capital A key, a nice streak built immediately across the picture. And obviously, you can go back and change this. And you see, since we can draw this any way we want to, you actually can do some very, very powerful things. And on the sheet that came with it, you'll find a couple of other scripts for doing things like over-the-shoulder graphics or other little embossed things that you can program as well. But if we were to hit this one, Shift-A, takes whatever color we've got, in this case white. There's the lighten, there's the darken. And let's hit the F10 key to render it out. There it is. Now again, if we wanted a different color, we would have picked a different color before we ran the macro. Also, looking at it, I might decide that, well, it's probably a little too thick there. Just a matter of going in and changing the numbers. Instead of having it go on the lighten here down to 95, let's have it go to 85. Instead of having it start at 150, let's have it start at 160. So it's finishing higher and starting lower, basically. And then the drop shadow, I'm okay with, actually. So we'll have it end at 200 still. Just resave, then debug it. And again, you get the idea here. And again, if this were difficult, I really wouldn't be showing it to you. The idea here is play around with it. And how much time does this save you in the long run? Well, if you create graphics on a fairly frequent basis, this can save you a ton of time. There's actually one other thing I might want to do is you could actually have it so it automatically renders it out to the screen. VWCO, that's View Composite, and that would just output it automatically to the Toaster's frame buffers. So you could add that if you want to. Again, I'm not going to do it here, but let's just see our new debugged keyboard shortcut. We'll pick a color that we think is appropriate. Do purple, Shift-A, and it draws the purple bar across, fading. Then should do a thinner lighten and darken with a drop shadow. And there it is. The instant streak sort of avoids the work there. So this is very, very handy. And again, you can go in and program a lot of different keyboard shortcuts. Create your own macros and really sort of simplify your work and customize it. If you don't like this bar, if you often do lower thirds, you don't have a bar that automatically does that, just assign it to any key that's not being used or that's being used in a redundant way within that. Also, another thing you could do with this, by the way, is the same trick we showed you before with the frame stores. There's nothing that would keep you from having 4 or 5 different keyboard.txt files. Remember, Toaster Paint's looking for a file called keyboard.txt. So if you have one called keyboard.txt2, it's going to ignore that. Just change the name of that to keyboard.txt, and you can actually have custom keyboard shortcut files for, you know, whatever function you're doing. So if you're going into a normal Paint session, you might have your normal one loaded up. But then if you just want to create some, you know, graphics using standard tools like streaks and boxes quickly, you can have a file you programmed already and hit the buttons and just bring it up right there. All right, now let's start to get into Lightwave, where we have some other uses of AREX, but it's a little more direct. There's a number of macros that come with Lightwave, and if you're a Lightwave user, or even if you're not that heavy a Lightwave user, there's a lot of things here that will save you a ton of time. So let's just exit out of Toaster Paint and start to get into Lightwave. And actually, the first thing I want to show you in Lightwave doesn't have anything to do with the AREX macros. The first thing I want to show you, and again, we're solving a problem, so let's explain the problem first, is the fact that let's say I go to Object, Load Object. Well, I've got DF0, HD0, HD1, RAM. And if I click on any of these, okay, this is nice. I've got these things, but I've got a directory in my system called VT1. Well, there's no VT1 button up here. Let's say I was using a SciQuest. Well, there's no SciQuest button up here either. So what do I do if I want to kind of very quickly get that up? Well, I have to customize these buttons. So that's one thing we're going to show you how to do. Here's the other problem. Let's say I'm in the camera mode and I decide to go to high res. Well, this warning comes up telling me that this option is not necessary for video work. Same thing, by the way, if I go and turn on trace shadows, it tells me that this option may greatly increase rendering time, or trace reflections, or trace refractions. All right, just to make sure you get this, this is the last time you need to hear it. If you go to high res or print res, it's not necessary for video work. If you turn on trace shadows, trace reflections, or trace refractions, it will increase rendering time. Any questions? No? Good? Okay. You never need to see these again. When I hit these buttons, I do not want to see it come up with that. And what we're going to do to change both of these things, to change our requesters and to put us into expert mode, is to change something called the Lightwave config file. This is another file that we can edit. And again, there's a just get to it the same way we did from Paint. Left Amiga M lets us toggle back out here. Let's close down our Paint screen. If we're editing that, just close that down. And let's find the Lightwave config file. Well, Lightwave config is in your toaster directory, inside a directory called 3D. Now, 3D actually houses a bunch of things. It houses the objects, images, scenes, envelopes, all those sorts of things that are associated with Lightwave. So again, if you want to go in and delete, let's say, some objects, this is where you do it. You go to 3D, Objects, you just pick the object, then go to Delete, or rename it, or move it into another drawer, so on and so forth. Okay. Now, the file we want to deal with here is Lightwave config. To edit it, double-click on it, and, well, it's coming up with this little thing. It's not working. It says the icons have no default tool. And this will occasionally happen. This will confuse you and make you want to quit the business. So rather than that happening, let me show you the easy way around this. All you have to do is select the file. Notice it's highlighted now. And I'm going to go to Info, Information right here, which is Write Amiga I. Write Amiga I. And you see it does not say executable. It's not listed. This is why it's not coming up. This is why it's not coming up with that little window that lets you type in add. So just change it to executable by clicking the button, then hit save. Now I double click on it and still doesn't work. What you have to do is shut down the drawer, because if we bring this up again, you see it says executable. Close the drawer down, then reopen the drawer, then double click on it and it pops up. Weird? Yes. Coincidence? I think not. You have to go through that and it will somehow work. Okay? So let's just go through here. We've double clicked on it. Select Ed. And here we are. We can edit it now. Okay, the first thing I want to do is put us in expert mode so we don't get those irritating warning messages. So I go to expert mode equals 1. It is on 0 normally, which means you're not in expert mode. Put on expert mode 1, you're now in expert mode. Save this file, of course. We've seen that already. Close it down. We'll go back. Now when we click on print res, okay, the irritating warnings come up. But wait, we know about this. We know that if we shut down Lightwave and then restart it, because the way computers work, it's going to reread the file at the beginning. And now when we go in and we hit on print res, it's not going to show us, nope, still doing it. Here's why. And this is an important thing. If you thought you were on to me, guess again. Here's what's happening. And this is only with Lightwave, but it's really important. If you're going to edit the Lightwave config file, do not have Lightwave up and running. Repeat, shut down Lightwave before you edit the file. And this is important because Lightwave actually, here's what it does. It's not just that it reads it in at the beginning like Toaster Paint does. It reads it in at the beginning and then rewrites it. And any changes you've made get ignored completely because it reads it into memory at the beginning, holds that in memory, then rewrites it with any changes you made in Lightwave. But if you've gone out and you've edited the file with Lightwave up, it'll completely ignore those changes. Now here's an example of that. Let me just show you why it works this way. You'll notice that under the record menu here, I don't have anything. No record setup, no record command, nothing like that. And indeed, if I were to open up this file, take a look at it, right down here, record setup 1, none. Oops, let me get rid of that. Record setup 2, none. Record delay, 0. First frame delay, 0. Okay. Close this down. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go in, I'm not going to edit the file, I'm actually going to make those changes here. I go to record, record setup, I'll just enter a bunch of garbage. Same thing under record setup 2. I'm just entering garbage to change this, by the way. You might actually use these settings, but your single frame controller may vary. Actual mileage may vary here, so try it with whatever your controller is. A lot of people don't use single frame controllers anymore, though, so some of these commands are less than relevant. But the point here is I've entered a couple garbage things here, and I'll enter 5 for our first frame delay, and then 3.14159 for our extra first delay. I will exit out of switcher. I will shut down Lightwave. Then I will re-enter Lightwave. And what you're going to see is any of the record commands that I entered there have been remembered. And in fact, if we were to reload this file, bring it up, lo and behold, here's the garbage that we entered, here's the numbers that we entered. And so what it did was it remembered the record settings that we put in, saved them as part of the file. You see, they're actually there as part of the file, then brought them up. And this is a good thing. The assumption here is if you change the record settings, if you have a certain setup that you need to use, it's always what you're going to use. So it remembers that for all eternity. Otherwise, it's going to forget it. So the key here is that if you want to save what you're doing in the file, exit Lightwave, completely shut it down, and then edit from that point. Now, one other thing that I might mention here is that if you somehow destroy this file, you don't even need to make a copy of it. Like the one I've got here, I'm not real happy with. One trick is that if I delete the Lightwave config file, I'm just going to go in, get rid of it. So there's no Lightwave config file anymore. If I go back to Toaster, start it up, Lightwave again, it automatically generates its own new Lightwave config file. It won't remember any of the settings we put in before. This is a fresh, virginal Lightwave config file with nothing in it, basically, except the default settings. But again, let me shut this down so I can edit it properly. This is handy because it means you cannot mess this up too much. Reopen 3D, and there it is, our new Lightwave config file. Okay, so let's actually, now that we've shut down Lightwave, now that we've seen the mistakes you can make, let's go in and make a couple of changes here. And the first one is the one we talked about before. Let's go in and put ourselves in expert mode. Just expert mode instead of 0 should be 1. And we'll talk about those changes when we go back. But let's go up to the top of the file here. This is pretty handy. It says File Requester Preset 1, 2, 3, and 4. These can be anything you want. You can set these any way your heart desires. Let's say you don't like the preset settings that come with the program. Okay, just change them. So for instance, I've got a drive called VT1, and that's where my toaster is. Well, here's the way to read this. File Requester Preset 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1 is just the first one on the left. 2 is the second one. 3 is the third one. 4 is the farthest on the right. So let's change it. I don't have a drive DF1 here, so I'll change it to the name Toaster. Toster. It's not that I don't know how to spell. It's that you can only use 6 characters there, so I got rid of the A. So it looks kind of like Toaster. You could go Toastr, but keep it to 6 characters there. So that's my toaster directory. Then I leave a space, and I put the drive name VT1. And this is just as it would appear on the setup screen. You have to put the colon at the end there. Now, another thing you could do is have a button that automatically goes to the frame stores directory. So instead of DH0, let me change this to HD1. We'll put this to be HD1. And instead of the RAM disk, which is using your computer's memory as a hard disk space, I hardly ever use that. What I want to do is I want to, let's call it frames. And frames will just be my frame store directory. And again, we're storing the frame stores on another drive here. So the frames are on HD1 on a drive called frame store. Okay, we've made a number of changes. We will go up here, save the file, shut this down, Control, Alt, Alt back, load up Lightwave, and the first thing you'll notice, go to Objects, Load Object, hey, Toaster HD1 frames. Hit on frames, it brings me straight to my HD1 frame store directory just as we entered there. Hit on Toaster, brings me to VT1. This is extremely handy. Now, if you want to get back, and here's just another general Lightwave hint. Let's say you go to your frames directory. Now I want to get back to where my objects